Hey people, it is time for our weekly Thursday check-in, and if you were here with me last week, you will probably be aware that, hey Carmen, thanks for popping in. If you were with me last week, you'll be aware that I was getting ready to finish off the Huevos tank top, which is just hiding over there behind me. Hey people, thank you for jumping in there. Nice to see all your happy faces and waves. At long last, the summer has arrived in Ireland. We've got hot weather by Irish standards. It is not by US standards. By Irish standards, we have hot weather. It's in Celsius, it's in the mid 20s, so like high 70s, kind of creeping into low 80s, I suppose, US weather. So you probably think that's just pleasantly warm. Here it's actively hot because this is pretty much as warm as we get, but it's lovely. Oh, Joe, you received your club package. Excellent, delighted to hear it. Yeah, anyone who's in the Celtic Knits Club, you will know that last week, or it might have been the week before, the blue clubs went out. It was accidental, but it was almost as though we were making up for the fact that the blue clubs were delayed in the last shipment, so they ended up being the first out this time. I suspect the mill actually had the blue fleece prepared and were probably ready to go with it, which is why it came out quickly. But the other two installments have not shipped yet. So if you are contrast or if you're neutral, they are not shipped yet because the yarn has not arrived here. Most are due in the next few days, with a few at the end of next week. But so do not worry, you can't look out for them yet because they're not coming yet, but soon. But back to our hot weather here in Ireland. It's kind of perfect timing because I'm announcing and launched an update of a pattern and a knit along and workshop. So let me pull Huevos in here. This is Huevos, which if you've been following me for a while, you may have seen before, but in a different guise, because the previous iteration of Huevos was, it was one that was done in a grey linen top, grey linen, whereas this one is coral cotton, so it's slightly different feel to it, a little bit more weight, but still, because of the lace, very open. And I hadn't realized it, and it was a little bit horrifying. The first time this was released was back in 2013, which makes me realize how quickly time goes. I'm suspecting there's plenty of you out there who have the same sensation, that time just seems to slip on by and you don't know what's happening. Obviously, the way I write patterns and some of the other back-end stuff has changed a bit since then. So as I was re-knitting, I decided to relay it out, and we did the tutorials. And also why I was going through it, because I kind of started seeing that there was a huge amount going on, particularly when you got to the yoke, that I began recording it. So as I was knitting each section, I just did a little bit of, as I did each section, I just went ahead and recorded small sections for that one. And so before I knew where we were at, we have 21 videos for a workshop. So that has gone up today. It's the Huevos workshop. If you've previously bought this pattern over the last several years, either on Ravelry or on my website, you'd have gotten an update today, which will include the link to the workshop and a discount code because of the fact that you've already purchased the pattern. But it also seemed like the perfect opportunity to launch a summer knit along. It'll be like a lower key knit along, but just one where we can get to play along with warmer weather techniques and work with a much lighter weight yarn. So if you want to join me, come along and either grab the pattern by itself if you feel like you've got a good handle on all of those techniques, or if you would rather have a little bit of video help along the way, then you should just jump in and get the workshop, because you'll be able to download the pattern from the workshop. And we've also got some coral yarn kits to go with it, where you can pick from all of our coral yarns and you'll get enough for your size. So there's like the smaller sizes will have 5 skeins, and then the larger ones will have 6. and it comes with just a drawstring bag that comes with it. So you'll find the kits up on the website, and as per usual, they're kind of bundled up. But I might kind of go through, first of all, a couple of the techniques and pointers on what happens with Huevos, and I'll also show you just a couple of my favorites of the coral yarn. I've just got some of the colors down there. So on to Huevos first here. I'm going to pop her in front. So you see in the front here, you begin, and it's a split hem. So that means at the beginning, you're going to start the hem with the front and the back separate. So you start with a bit of garter, and then you introduce the lace in the middle, and you're working the directions for back and forth in rows. Because obviously both garter stitch and lace patterns, they're going to be worked differently depending on whether you work them flat or whether you work them in the round. So you start off with them flat, and then you change them in the round. And when you change them in the round, you're then going to move on to the next set of directions. So that's the first thing. If you haven't really done a lot of ones which are flat versus in the round or with different stitch patterns, that's the first thing to keep an eye out from. And then from there, you're working up in the round for a few inches. And the next thing you're doing is you're going to start decreasing. Because you see here, it's an A-line shaping. The bottom of it is wide and nice and swingy, and the bust of it is quite fitted. And you do that by creating an A-line shape, which decreases as you're going up. And all of the decreases, they don't happen in the garter stitch on the side, they happen on the lace. So if you are new to doing any kind of increases or decreases in lace, that the workshop might be really helpful, because it's something you can kind of pull into other patterns as well. I show you just how I place markers, what I do with the stitches that are outside of the decreases and also outside of the lace repeats. So I think watching how you progress through that can be very helpful. So that's the next big thing that's covered in the workshop. Then once we come up here and it's split for front and back, you're going to start, I'll turn around because the back here, I did decreases for the armhole first of all, and then the very top section here where it curves, I'm actually using a little bit of short row. So again, that's going to be a lot new to people to attempt to do short rows with the lace going on. Elsa Louise, you were asking if I used bamboo or metal needles. I actually started with metal needles thinking I was going to prefer them, and I found that the cotton was slipping too much. As soon as I switched to bamboo with the lace, I was far, far happier. I just got a little bit more grip, and it was much, much easier to manipulate the stitches. And the reason that's peculiar is when I was working this same yarn, the coral yarn for my Dusty Roads, which is primarily stockinette stitch, the metal needles worked better. When I was just doing the knit stitch round and round, it just flowed nice and smoothly. As soon as I started working to primarily lace, I discovered that the bamboo for me gave me a little bit extra stick, and I wasn't losing my stitches with the cotton yarn and needles. So it was that one it surprised me because of the fact that I'd just been working with the yarn. So obviously it's not just the yarn needle combo, it's also whatever stitch pattern you're working with. Some ones are going to work a little bit easier than others. Rosalind, yeah, bamboo is easier in your hands. Yeah, I find that as well, particularly as the weather warms up. I find that metal can sometimes start getting a little bit slick and slip around a bit, whereas bamboo, you're just not going to have the same slip in warmer weather, because this is definitely what this knit along is all about, particularly over here in our steamy Mediterranean Irish climate, apparently. We're now going to have to figure out what's comfortable to knit in warm weather and what makes it easier. So that's kind of the techniques on the back section that we were going through. And the final thing you'll do is the front, almost the same as the back with the difference, because you're splitting here in front. So you're doing the two ones separately, and your short rows and your neck shaping obviously drops down further because the neck's up a lot further in the back. So there's lots of stuff going on, and most of it is actually happening up in the top section, but it was a really enjoyable knit, and it doesn't take up much yarn, and the coral colors are just phenomenal. If you haven't actually gone and looked at them on the website, I suggest kind of popping in, because I think there's over 40 color choices I've got up there. So the likelihood is you're probably going to find something you like. This one's called Curry, and I'm really partial to it because I wear quite a bit of black. And so then for something like that, putting a big bright color pop over the top just works really well. So this is my coral color here, just in the skein and the durable yarn. And I pulled out a couple of, there's obviously loads more colors, but I pulled out a few more of my favorites from the shelf. This is tropical green. I don't know if you can see it, but you know the way some colors are kind of hard to transmit on camera? It's got almost like a glistening glow to it, similar to the curry color. This one I also actually really like. This is coral. How can I put it? You know, some colors are just the right shade, and this is just the right shade between kind of pinks and reds. It's a very nice color. I've got 3 or 4 grays because I love grays. In fact, if I hadn't knitted in the curry, it would probably be in a gray. Oh, I hear somebody's lost me. Hopefully, with the replay up, you'll be able to see it because it's still showing it as transmitting on my side here. This gray here is called Slate, and again it's a nice little neutral gray, and there's a few others, one called Ash, which is also very good. And I've got a few pinks, kind of particularly on the dusty end of pinks, that I love, and this one is Raspberry, which is also another favorite of mine. And there's one called similar to this but just slight variation called Dusty Rose, which is also very, very pretty. So I think there's probably enough colors up there that you should be able to find most things you like. It's actually why I put all of the colors in for the kits, because there's so many and I couldn't pick my favorites, so I just put them all up. More or less is what I did. No, not very inventive. But if you've got any more questions in relation to the Huevos, just pop them up there. So as I'm talking through, I'm happy to kind of circle back around. And speaking of knit-alongs, the other thing I would really want to talk to you about today is something we've just done. It's kind of a gentle launch. We haven't made a huge big fuss over it yet, so we just want to start it slowly as we ease our way into it. But we've begun a new KnitHub, a community website, where it's a series of forums, and it's going to be, it'll be primarily for support, so the sections for each of our workshops, and it's completely linked in with the Teachable workshop. So if you are on Teachable and you're part of a workshop, you can now pop down to the bottom right of the screen and you'll see a little black symbol with the talk symbol in it. And if you click that, the circle forums will pop up. And the great thing about popping stuff in there is you can actually chat with other knitters. So if you've got something that you think might help others out, or if you think it's something that's probably better aimed at other knitters rather than at me, then it's a great spot to put it in. And we've also got just general introductions and lots of just fun sections. You know, what's your favorite cake, favorite podcast for listening to while you knit, or in my case, usually audiobooks, because I'm a big audiobook fan for driving and while knitting. So if you're part of Teachable already, just pop in there. Otherwise, you can find on social, and we will have down underneath here just links to the new community. So come in and introduce yourself and have a poke around and see what you think. Because I felt like it was just nice to have a new little community space where we can really where everything is more central, because it felt like what was happening between starting on Ravelry and then a little bit on Facebook and a little bit on the Teachable discussion groups, it was getting a little, do you have time before the next club start? Time for what? Time to join? Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Jitbug there. So if you want to kind of post up another line there, you can let me know what you mean. And as Nadia just pointed out, cake. There is cake. Nadia likes cake. We all like cake. So if there's any favorite cake recipes you have, or things like that, just pop it up. Oh, do you have time to do the knit along? Well, the next club patterns will be coming out next week, but it's possible that it's too warm where you are to actually get started on those patterns yet. So you could probably slot this in over the next couple of weeks to get started, or you can do it afterwards, because we're launching this on the 2nd of August is when I'm having the official cast on date. So you might actually end up reversing it and do the knit along ones first, and then join the knit along afterwards. Might actually make a lot of sense as well. If any other questions there in relation to Huevos and the general knit along, just let me know. I thought I would also tell you what's on my needles, because I seem to be finding myself in a bit of a transition spot right now, because I'd finished Huevos and I've got a couple of small little projects for an upcoming club that for autumn, but I hadn't started. I'd started on a few of them, but they required a lot of thinking. So I felt like I wanted one big project where I could do the planning and then move it on. So I've actually asked one of my children wears an awful lot of sweaters, as does his girlfriend. So I was thinking for the autumn of actually doing a cardigan sweater combo for each of them. And they were really into it, needless to say, because most teenagers don't say no to a new sweater being knit specifically for them. But I'm just going to. Sorry for that. I'm not sure if any of you are still there with me. I got briefly interrupted. I was talking just about my knit along, not the knit along, what I was knitting on for my children. So this is the Bloster yarn that I'm using. It is Burgundy Twist, and I've just been swatching different stitch patterns, and you can't see this terribly well, but it's a double moss with some twisted stitches here, just one cable flowing into another. And that's often how I get started, is I just do a swatch, pulling out stitch patterns and just going from one onto another and seeing what they look like together, and then using it as well to measure gauge. And generally speaking, then I might take the initial gauge off this and start knitting with the wider stretch, but modifying it and maybe undoing it afterwards if I realize that it's not quite matching up. So that's often, particularly for yarn that I have at home here, that's how I end up getting started on the whole process. So hopefully this doesn't, the cable gets lost in the marl. Yeah, it does, but it's actually more about, there's going to be two versions of this. One version will be in a very light single color, and the cable, I'm not going to use the more complex cable. I think I'm actually going to go with more of this stitch pattern, and there's just one very simple staghorn cable here that I'll probably do. Nothing complex is going to really work in marl. So I find texture stitches work really nicely, and like a small bit of twisted stitches. But other than that, I'm probably just going to keep it very minimal from a cable point of view. Moss stitch is beautiful in it. Oh, good morning from Buffalo. I'm actually just finishing up, but I will have the recording up so that you're welcome to listen back if you want to. Thank you everyone for joining me here. I'll be here next week chatting with you again. Should hopefully be able to share some of the Celtic Knits club patterns. We'll see if most of the clubs are shipped out at that point. And then the week after that, I'm going to be off on holiday. So one more week before the holidays, and then we're off. So bye everyone.